on this edition of Sightings. In 1948, Captain Thomas Mantell died chasing a UFO. The Air Force said it was the planet Venus. Now, eyewitnesses tell us they saw the UFO.
At that time, it was general procedure that nobody talk about UFOs.
Diana Lubarsky never knew how to sculpt until she started dreaming of her death at the hands of the Nazis.
Whatever happens, you remember this. You remember.
Right there.
Bart Ellis believes he can finally prove that California's Olivos Adobe really is haunted.
That's absolute evidence of life after death.
The ancient Hawaiians believed they could predict natural disasters. Has this man uncovered their secrets? And will recent discoveries of life on Mars turn speculation to fact?
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. When Captain Thomas Mantell's P-51 fighter plane dropped out of the sky on the 7th of January, 1948, it created a UFO controversy that remains unsolved to this day. Did Mantell die at the hands of an alien astronaut, or was he, as the Air Force contends, mistakenly chasing the planet Venus or a weather balloon? Well, now, for the first time in nearly a half-century, key players in the Mantell mystery are about to talk.
No one's ever going to convince me I didn't see it, because there were too many of us that did.
At that time, it was general procedure that nobody talk about UFOs.
On January 7th, 1948, high above the bluegrass pastures of rural Kentucky, National Guard Captain Thomas Mantell Jr. saw a UFO that he considered to be a serious threat to the security of the United States. Tower controllers at Godman Field, Fort Knox, saw it too and allowed Mantell to pursue the UFO. A decorated war hero, he had survived anti-aircraft fire in World War II, but Tommy Mantell would not return from this encounter. According to the original Air Force investigation of the crash, Mantell died not in pursuit of a UFO, but while mistakenly chasing the planet Venus. But now, nearly 50 years later, eyewitnesses to Mantell's death are speaking out publicly for the first time, and they have a very different story to tell.
They described the object as being very large, metallic, round metallic object.
Pilot Herb Kipp distinctly remembers hearing the term UFO to describe the object that would take Mantell's life.
In 1948, I was a control tower operator at Stanford Field. We got a phone call from Godwin Tower, and he asked if we had any P-51s in the area, and I said, "Why, what's the problem?" He said, "We have a UFO hovering over our airport." And I thought somebody was playing a joke on me or something, and I kind of snickered a little bit. And this other voice came on and said, "This is Colonel so-and-so, and I'm the base commander. And Mr. Kipp, this is no drill. This thing is hovering right over the airport."
Along with the base commander in the tower at Godman Field that day was Base Intelligence Officer Captain James Dusler.
The UFO was in the air for 4 hours, and it didn't move, it just stayed there. We were looking at something and didn't know what in the world we were looking at.
At the time of the sighting, Captain Mantell was leading a squadron of P-51s for the Kentucky National Guard. Over Godman Field, there was no longer anything routine about this mission.
Mantell was requested to pursue this unidentified flying object.
A retired Air Force Reserve captain, Tabor has researched the Mantell case for 15 years.
One of the pilots in the flight, Al Clements, said to him, "Tommy, you don't have any air, you can't do this." Mantell replied back, "Al, don't worry about it, it's not a problem." They continue on up. Clements finally caught onto it himself. He described it as a large glowing object.
He said, my 2 wingmen are coming in. We want hot guns, and we want them now.
According to air traffic controller Quentin Blackwell, Mantell ordered the other planes back to load on live ammunition while he continued to climb toward the UFO. Only this man is still alive to describe what happened next. He is telling his story for the first time since 1948.
The day of the Mantell crash, I was 6 years old. My mother was taking clothes in off the line. She'd been watching a bright light in the sky. We heard a loud plane, and we saw this fighter plane coming in below the bright light. Got pretty close to it, and all of a sudden went straight up at it. And then when he got all the way to it, he leveled off and flew away from it to the west.
Mantell's plane smashed into the ground, going in excess of Mach 1. Captain Dusler was among the first investigators on the scene. As a seasoned intelligence officer, Dusler had been at many crash sites before, but this one was extraordinary and deeply disturbing.
There wasn't a drop of blood anyplace. Now, I talked to one of the coroner people. It was odd because there was no blood. Odd because there was no fire. I don't ever recall seeing a crash like that, or as serious as that didn't have a fire. I never saw his body because the coroner had taken it away.
No one at the funeral home saw the body. It was in a black leather bag, and then it was sealed inside a lead coffin. The body was buried on the 10th of January, 1948, 3 days after the accident. Certainly a closed coffin funeral. But again, we have a question. Was there even a body in that black leather bag? No one saw the remains.
Despite official denials, there is ample evidence that the Air Force sent a special UFO investigative team from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio to the Mantell crash site. Sightings has obtained memos indicating that Colonel H.M. McCoy, Chief of Air Force Intelligence at Wright-Pat, and his investigator, Al Loading, were attempting to gather information on the flying disc Mantell was chasing. One memo contains a transcription of Loading's request for information about Captain Dusler.
He was the only man assigned to, as he called it, Saucer Project. He had file case after file case after file case filled with reports.
One of the keys to solving this case comes from finding out more information about the Air Force intelligence team that was sent to investigate this incident. Who is Mr./Dr. Loading?
One of the intriguing operatives in the early Project Sign, which had to do with UFO investigations, was a civilian engineer employed at Wright-Patterson named Alfred Ludding. Alfred Ludding was originally part of T3 engineering design, but he was assigned very early in the game, in July of 1947, to work on flying discs for the intelligence group.
Michael Swords is a natural sciences professor at Western Michigan University and is the editor of the highly regarded Journal of UFO Studies. He has uncovered an intriguing link between Wright-Patterson, the mysterious Mr. Loading, and real-life flying saucers.
Al Ludding, for reasons that we don't know, early in July of 1947, designed a flying disc-shaped craft, which, although he was not allowed to patent it at that time, ultimately got a patent for in the early 1950s.
In 1952, Alfred C. Loading was granted a U.S. patent for this low aspect ratio aircraft design. The craft's flying saucer shape raises many intriguing questions. Was Loading's design a flight of fancy? Or was he inspired by something he had actually seen during his tenure in Air Force intelligence?
If we can answer these questions, if we can find out their background, then we can have a little bit more information that could answer as to whether this was an extraterrestrial vehicle.
But the solution to the Mantell mystery is unlikely to come from the one source that probably knows the truth. The Air Force explanation that Mantell died from anoxia, lack of oxygen, while chasing Venus, is contradicted even in their earlier report, recently obtained by Sightings. In this memo, written just after the crash and dated a decade earlier than the official report, Venus is ruled out as the UFO Mantell died for in the sky above his Kentucky home. The Mantell case is important for many reasons, including one that not many people know about. It was the Mantell case that launched the career of the grandfather of ufology. J. Allen Hynek, the originator of the term close encounters, was a little-known astronomy professor at Ohio State University when he was called in by the Air Force to consult on the Mantell case. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Next, in another life, she committed the ultimate act of mercy.
I hit her in the back of the head and killed her.
Recently, Sightings brought you the story of Bruce Whittier, a Nova Scotia farmer who believes he is the reincarnation of a Dutch Jew killed during the Holocaust. Bruce is just one of a number of people now coming forward with similar stories. In this report, we introduce you to an artist whose own odyssey into the phenomenon began with a series of strange dreams. Dreams, she says, that hit her like 5,000 jigsaw puzzles.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what hit me. It was something incongruous to my life, where I was dreaming of Holocaust, and I didn't understand why I was dreaming of Holocaust.
Until the terrifying nightmares began, Diana Lubarski's life was quite normal. Married with her first child on the way, Diana's mind was on the future and raising a family. But it was the past that invaded her dreams, beginning shortly after her son was born in 1974. And despite her limited artistic ability, Diana discovered she could sculpt powerful works of art inspired by her Holocaust dreams.
As much as I want to paint, I can't paint. And as much as I want to play the piano, I can't play the piano. But these images come in my head and my hands go on the clay and it's almost effortless. Somehow or another, these thoughts and images and faces just intruded into my mind, and they were as real as my own life.
They are so real, in fact, that Diana has gradually come to believe that she is not merely dreaming, but is also remembering real-life events from a past life, a life she must now preserve for posterity. Author and Judaic scholar Rabbi Yonasan Gershom has studied Diana's link to the Holocaust.
When I first saw the photographs of the sculptures that Diana lent to me, I was moved to tears. But that could not compare with how I felt when I actually saw the sculptures in person. She has captured in clay the essence of the Holocaust. They're not skeletons, they're not piles of bodies, but they are very human portrayals of what people might have experienced.
Although Diana is Jewish, she had never been strictly observant, and no one was more surprised by the wrenching images she was creating than her family and friends.
I know what her life experience is during this life, and I know that she wasn't reading books about the Holocaust or, looking at photos or anything like that. That was not happening. This just came out of her head.
Artwork is something beautiful to look at, but only some artwork speaks.
Rabbi Ben Romer was so overwhelmed by Diana's sculptures that he agreed to show them at the Jewish chapel at West Point.
There's a sense of quiet pain. There's a place where you see what children have suffered, but there may be hope for the future. There's a sense of what was, what happened, and what could be.
The Gentile world thinks of Judaism only in terms of the Old Testament and is often not aware that we have many stories about prophetic dreams, about visions, about memories of past lives. We do not seek to contact the dead, but it sometimes does happen that through a dream or a vision, someone from the other side may contact us. And when that happens, then we accept that contact as a gift from God.
And what began for Diana as random, frightening images eventually came into a sharp and very personal focus.
The first image is of a family, a husband, wife, son, daughter, very happy. Time passes. Things have changed. The door slams open. The Gestapo comes in and grabs them, throws them out into the street with other people. Again, time passes. There's a train. It's a cattle car. I don't know what's happening. I'm frightened. And I'm sitting on the ground, and I'm with an old man. I believe him to be a rabbi. And he holds my hand and he says, whatever happens, you remember this. You remember.
Diana, as a young German mother, dreamed of telling the rabbi she would always remember.
Again, time passes. We're in a pretty awful place. And I was digging in the dirt. And I found a rock. And I dug it out. I love my children and my family very dearly. But we were dying. I called my daughter over and told her we would play a game. And with every ounce of strength I had, I hit her in the back of the head and killed her. She would die by my hand, not by anybody else's.
This horrible act of mercy haunts Diana to this day, and much of her work tells the story of those last desperate days.
This is the family that I believe I was a part of, the father and the mother and the two children. These are the children that I gave the gift of life to, and ultimately these are the children that I killed, that I gave the gift of freedom, and I died with.
In a case like Diana Lubarsky's, I think what convinces me is the general feel of her presence. I have met many, many Jews who have this strong connection with the Holocaust that goes deeper than history. And the only way that I can describe my reaction is that I see it in their eyes. They have old eyes. They show me somehow on a nonverbal level that they have experienced something from another life.
One always hopes that whatever was good and wonderful, spiritually uplifting of those who came before us becomes part of us. How it gets to us, I don't know, but it's there.
Although Diana's dreams have been painful, she believes that there is a reason beyond knowing why she has been chosen to speak for the dead.
I think I'm a conduit from another time and another place. For a whole bunch of people who died and perhaps didn't know why they died. And I can hear them in my head saying, who will remember me? How will they know that we were ever alive? How will they ever see us? Nobody in the world will ever know that we were living. And I answer them and I say, I will remember you.
While there are many people now coming forward who believe that they are the reincarnated souls of Holocaust victims, it's important to remember that the horror of the Nazi death camps is not ancient history. There are still thousands of Holocaust survivors alive today, and their stories need to be heard also.
Next, leading experts present their best case for the existence of UFOs. And science discovers how the universe might have been seeded with life.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. Last year, the wife of an ambassador went to one of the richest men in the world and asked for money to fund a special investigative report. Lawrence Rockefeller gave Mrs. Galbraith the money. And now the report is in. It's called Unidentified Flying Objects Briefing Document, the best available evidence. In Brentwood, Maryland, UFO researcher Richard Hall is hopeful that the new briefing document will finally convince world leaders that UFOs are real.
There is a great deal of ignorance about UFO history, so it's important to cut through all the tabloid kind of thing and get down to serious facts with people who can do something about it.
The meticulously researched report taps the extensive files of the Center for UFO Studies, the Fund for UFO Research, and the Mutual UFO Network. It is the first cooperative attempt to legitimize UFOs to the world's important decision makers.
The cases were selected on the basis of being well documented with such things as military intelligence reports, and they were chosen to represent many different countries.
The case histories presented here cover the period from World War II to the present, and the document is especially compelling because it relies on highly credible eyewitnesses, including numerous military officers.
The best thing that could happen from this project is that world leaders would begin to treat this seriously and band together to get something accomplished. And to do that, you have to get past this business where everybody thinks it's a kooky, crackpot subject.
This document is not available to the public, but Sightings will reveal many of the details included in the report on a future program. On the World Wide Web, the Millennium Matters is the Internet's New Age manual for the year 2000 and beyond. Click on icons like this to find links to all topics paranormal, spiritual, and environmental. In Gaia, there are earthquake predictions and seismograms when they happen. Call up U-formation to acquaint yourself with the alien faces of the past, present, and future. And then relax in The Sanctuary with herbal remedies, yoga, and, the editor's hope, a spiritual reawakening. To access the Millennium Matters on the World Wide Web, the address is www.m-m.org/tilde/jz/intro.html. In Baltimore, Maryland, at the Hubble Telescope receiving station that has already brought us pictures of black holes and infant stars, new images just in may hold the key to the imponderable. How was our galaxy born? This is a picture of a distant galaxy. It was snapped in 1996, but because the image can only travel at the speed of light, this picture is actually 11 million years old. Hubble has found 18 giant clumps of stars whose configuration suggests that galaxies are formed from smaller groups of stars and gases which have been drawn together by gravity into a kind of cosmic kaleidoscope. This finding brings us one step closer to understanding the birth of our galaxy, but also leads us to wonder what forms of life have developed in this distant place in the past 11 million years. We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
Stories of ghosts haunting this historic California adobe were never substantiated until Sightings brought in electronic voice phenomena expert Bart Ellis to listen.
In particular, I'd like to hear from the lady in black.
Many paranormal investigators are now moving away from traditional theories about ghosts to study a phenomenon known as residual haunting. This is the belief that certain haunted places, especially historic places, retain energy from the past that continues to replay in the present. Investigators believe this residual energy creates a kind of psychic wound in the environment that never heals.
Sometimes this place is as peaceful and calm as my own living room. I feel very much at home here. Other times I come in and it's ice cold. And sometimes I really feel as if I'm being watched. Sometimes I feel almost like whatever is here doesn't want me here. Those days I go into the office and do paperwork.
Richard Sennett is the curator of the Olivas Adobe in Ventura, California, one of the oldest surviving ranchos in the West. This adobe and the surrounding 5,000 acres were once the domain of Raimundo Olivas, the patriarch of one of the richest families in California. In 1972, the Olivas adobe was donated to Ventura County, and that's when the secret of the adobe began to leak out.
Since 1972, there have been reports of ghosts here. It was at that time that we started to get reports of a woman in black being seen inside the house. First, park crews coming out to cut the grass and maintain the area would report seeing a woman inside the house looking out at them. And they thought it was someone who had broken in. So they would call the police. In fact, they called the police 5 or 6 times, and they would come inside. There'd be no one here. There were many stories about being watched, seeing the woman. Many of them I got from ex-employees. It seems that for some strange reason, after they had an encounter, they tend to quit.
Dorothy Wilson is a volunteer docent at the Olivas Adobe and a former skeptic.
Here I come out here, a non-believer, quite frankly. And then it happens to me? Hard to believe, really.
It was early morning. Dorothy was alone in the adobe. Suddenly there was a form, the lady in black.
The best I can do is draw you a figure like that. And I don't know whether you could, how did you explain a figure like that? It's almost as if I had a black mantilla on and it covered me almost completely. Totally in black, you understand, with obviously the back toward me. I did a double take, stepped back and looked in the room. Whatever it was gone.
Many historic sites are haunted. And I think there's a really logical reason why. They are historic sites because lots of passionate, violent, important things happened within those walls.
All these emotions have played out within the walls of the rancho. The land was granted to Raimundo Olivas in 1841. He brought his bride, Teodora, here. They had 21 children. Their home was a social and political center until Raimundo died. Greed tore the family apart, and the fortune was squandered. In her last years, Teodora was destitute and desperately lonely.
Toward the end, she was just reduced to a very low state. The family fortune was gone. Finally, she passed on.
Many believe Teodora is the lady in black, but there are other women who also suffered and died in this house.
I'm drawn into this room.
Sightings asked psychic investigator Dr. Susan Stewart to tour the adobe.
I recognized when I came here what people were referring to, the lady in black. You can see her in your mind's eye. Oh, all right. In this mirror, you'll be able to see her face.
How would you describe the way you see her?
Very wonderful, strong jaw and beautiful brows coming straight across. Defined face. It's a strong, powerful, attractive face. It's not actually a spirit. It's the clairvoyant memory of a spirit. So what that essentially means, clairvoyant, French word means clear seeing. So what's happening is we are seeing essentially a memory. We are seeing not what's actually occurring at the time, but what did occur many, many, many times in the past. So it's almost as though it's a piece of video or film that's caught in a loop.
Stewart and several other eyewitnesses described the lady in black as young, perhaps 18 or 19, the same age Teodora's daughter-in-law, Maria, was when she died in childbirth. To further determine the possible identity of the lady in black, EVP expert Bart Ellis set up digital recording devices throughout the Olivas adobe.
EVP is electronic voice phenomena. It's a process of recording paranormal voices. We are hoping that we can have some of our unseen friends. We know for a fact that it is legitimate, valid phenomena, and it's one of the very few phenomena in psychic research that can be validated. We'd like to know who it is that's in this house. Who is it that's in this house? Can you identify yourself for us?
Under scientifically controlled conditions and with new factory-sealed blank audio tape, recordings were made throughout the house, with particular attention paid to 3 hot spots: the sewing room, the children's room, and the master bedroom. Several hours of tape were recorded in what seemed like complete silence. The recordings were played back in a sound studio, and tape after tape revealed nothing. Then, one sound on one of the final tapes spoke to Bart Ellis.
Right there. Hear that? Hello. Play it back.
Recently, the U.S. Geological Survey began predicting the probable locations and magnitudes of earthquakes in Northern California. Well, so far, their accuracy rate hasn't been very good. And even with state-of-the-art equipment and the best seismologists in the country, the USGS doesn't even come close to predicting earthquakes as accurately as one high school science teacher in Hawaii.
Will the heavens weep and the earth will grow? The earth will quake, the earth will vibrate, the earth will move, and life will begin again.
After more than 1,000 years here, Native Hawaiians believe that they have learned to hear the earth when she speaks and to watch the skies for what will come. Folklore tells of priests who knew when the rain would fall, the wind would blow, and the earth would shake.
They have what we call hua'ailona, omens or portents, and many of our priests and our elders would look and see these symbols in the skies.
On Oahu, at Damien Memorial High School, ancient tales of accurate predictions of earth changes captivated high school teacher and religion chairman Mike Lee. For fun, he began to see if he could develop a scientific prediction method based on the old ways of the Hawaiian priests, the kahunas.
The ancient Hawaiians believed that Pele, the fire goddess, was able to cause earthquakes through volcanic eruptions.
When Lee learned that Pele's sacred name translates as the moon in the flames, he used a simple computer program to search for connections between the moon and earthquakes.
I can take a vantage point from the moon and see where the earth is at a particular time in history.
At first, the connection just wasn't there. There had to be more to the ancient method than plotting the position of the moon in relation to the earth. There had to be something Lee was missing.
And I was looking at the data, and I wanted to piece together how did the ancient Hawaiian priests actually predict earthquakes months in advance.
He went back to Pele's name, the moon in the flames, and wondered if perhaps the ancients might be referring to the orange cast the moon takes on during a lunar eclipse.
Pele, the volcano goddess, is seen in the sky during a lunar eclipse. And the Hawaiians had the theory that whenever a lunar or a solar eclipse took place, regular patterns of earthquakes would follow.
Lee studied what was happening in the sky during famous volcanic eruptions and earthquakes of the past, and was startled to discover a definite pattern between Earth changes and both lunar and solar eclipses.
On February 26, 1979, we have a solar eclipse taking place over the Pacific Northwest. 15 months later, we have the eruption in May of Mount St. Helens in 1980. And what we see here is the shadow moving from the Pacific Ocean right over Mexico City. 16 months later, we have almost an 8-point earthquake in Mexico City.
Using a theory based on a 1,000-year-old method and his own modern formula, Lee began to see if he could predict future earthquakes the way he had charted historic ones.
Class, I'm going to show you something pretty exciting.
One day he came up and he says that he's finally got it, and he's written down dates on the board.
I'm going to predict an earthquake May 5th, which is a Friday, 1995.
In 1995, in front of a small group of amused students, Lee predicted that there would be a quake near Hilo in 2 weeks.
I pretty much felt like that it was, you know, a try at, or a reach at something that was unreachable.
But the snickering stopped when an earthquake hit the Big Island within 1 week of Lee's prediction.
My reaction to it was, I believed something that should not be believed.
Since then, Lee has continued to predict the times, locations, and magnitudes of earthquakes worldwide, and he has an unnerving accuracy rate. And no one is more astonished than Lee that the ancient folk tales of his childhood seem to have scientific validity.
The question is, so what's new? What else is new?
John Keola Lake is a teacher and historian whose chants celebrate the rich cultural gifts of his ancestors. Lake believes that Mike Lee is merely reinventing what the ancient kahunas knew all along.
They had quite a knowledge on knowing when catastrophes were coming about, when the next earthquake would come.
Despite the accuracy of Lee's earthquake predictions, mainstream science has not embraced his metaphysically inspired theory.
How can spirituality exist on the same plane as scientific evidence?
I think that computers are the modern gods for us today. We rely on them. In the past, the ancient people relied on their belief system and their gods.
So convinced is he that his method works, Mike Lee recently wrote to President Fujimori of Peru, warning him of a potentially life-threatening quake in that country.
I think if we're going to make any progress in predicting earthquakes here on Earth, that we're going to really have to take a serious look at this.
Lee is frustrated by the fact that more experienced scientists with more powerful computers have largely ignored his earthquake prediction method. But for the people of Hawaii, deeply rooted in the Earth and her mysteries, Lee's predictions are ancient history.
According to the USGS, there was a moderate earthquake in Peru during the time Michael Lee said that there would be one. Lee predicted a 7.2. The actual magnitude was 5.3. If you're wondering whether it's time to pack up the china and crystal, you can get Michael Lee's upcoming predictions on the World Wide Web at www.damien.edu/lee.html.
Next, the experts speculate on what happened to the life on Mars.
Living organisms from Mars could very easily get to the Earth, very easily.
August 7th, 1996 will go down in history as the day NASA told the world what many people said they already knew. Breathless with excitement, NASA Chief Dan Golden declared August 7th the day we open the door to other worlds. For the first time, a U.S. government official was openly admitting the possibility of life on Mars. And it all started with one little rock.
Antarctica, 1984. Just after Christmas, a team of American meteorite hunters had no idea that they had just made one of the most exciting scientific discoveries of the century.
The day started out very windy and very cold.
29-year-old Robbie Score, a geologist from the Meteor Lab at the Johnson Space Center, saw it first. A rock glowing green in a sea of white.
We were on this one ice field, which was the furthest ice field from the Allen Hills. There was no scenery. It was basically, you felt like you were out in the frozen ocean.
The team collected nearly 100 meteorites on their expedition, but Robbie remembered finding this one. She found it almost by accident while the group was out joyriding on their snowmobiles during a well-deserved break.
It's just really fun, and we were all really excited as we were leaving the areas when we ran into the rock that's now so famous.
It sat in a lab for nearly 12 years before the discovery of something inside the meteorite propelled this hunk of rock into the headlines. The topography of Mars, so similar to our own, with its chinks and fissures, riverbeds and mountains, has captivated the scientific imagination for more than 100 years. At the turn of the century, Percival Lowell was the first American to suggest that there was life on our nearest planetary neighbor. In the 1920s, astronomer David Todd gained worldwide attention when he claimed to have successfully recorded radio signals from Mars. Since then, many members of the scientific community have continued to search for irrefutable proof that life, past or present, may exist on Mars. Now, some say that proof has a name, Meteorite 84001. Within this innocuous-looking rock are microscopic structures that look like fossils. And after analysis of the gases inside it, the general consensus is that the rock is Martian.
It's pretty certain that these things came from Mars. There are just fingerprints of Mars all over these meteorites.
Dr. Michael Carr is a geologist whose work with NASA and the exploration of Mars began in 1971 with the Mariner 9 mission. Dr. Carr and his colleagues are convinced that the Earth is littered with pieces of Mars.
So how did they get to the Earth? Well, it seems pretty certain that these things were ejected from Mars by a large impact. All the bodies in the solar system are being impacted by meteorites all the time, and there are about 500 that fall on the Earth every day.
So for millions of years, those pieces orbit around the sun, and eventually the Earth hit one of them. And that piece is what we now find in the laboratory, seems to contain microscopic fossils of possible past life on Mars.
These images are at the center of the life on Mars debate. Structures inside the meteorite that many believe are the fossil remains of microorganisms. The possibility that these organisms ever existed on Mars furthers the provocative theory that life on Earth and Mars were once evolving simultaneously.
Back in the early days of Mars, Mars was very similar to the Earth, and that has led to speculation over the years that maybe life got started on Mars as well as on the Earth.
Yes, it's conceivable. The finding of these meteorites has caused all kind of speculation. And so living organisms from Mars could very easily get to the Earth, very easily. So, yes, life could have started on Mars and ended up flourishing on Earth.
Could it be that life on Mars has come full circle? Have we met the Martians? And are they us?
If it turns out that life evolved independently on Mars, the implications are tremendous. And that means to me that the universe ought to be crawling with life.
Today, Rock 84001 speaks to us across all those billions of years and millions of miles. It speaks of the possibility of life. If this discovery is confirmed, it will surely be one of the most stunning insights into our universe that science has ever uncovered. Its implications are as far-reaching and awe-inspiring as can be imagined.
Among the only sour notes sounded during the ballyhoo over the Mars rock was one comment from an unexpected critic. When asked to comment on the importance of the Mars rock, Ray Bradbury, author of Martian Chronicles and a lifelong science fiction visionary, had a simple two-word answer. Bradbury said, "It's stupid."
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. Download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips from Sightings episodes. On the internet, access information about sightings and the paranormal at sci-fi.com/sightings.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.